And welcome into this week's episode of Craze's Corner. This week we have a trade for show. We're going to be talking about guys that we are trying to acquire in redraft leagues and maybe dynasty leagues as well, but mostly redraft leagues. We're all each going to bring up 3 guys that we are trying to trade for, guys that we're trying to put packages together to see if we can acquire this player, guys that might be able to help you win your fantasy football championships. You're going to make sure you stay tuned for that. We have some guests in: Zach from Ocean State, Jeff from Presser/Media, and Will from Presser/Media as well. Just wanted to give you guys a quick rundown. This show is brought to you by Presser. It's a virtual press conferencing app that will allow you to host a virtual press conference from your phone. You'll be able to download the app on the Google Play and the App Store. You'll be able to download the app, and then you can post your press conference with a virtual background with mics in front of you, whatever your preference is. And you post it any platform you want, social media across the board. You should go check that out. But yeah, like I said, we're going to be doing a trade for target show this week. How are we doing tonight, guys?
Doing good.
And just
tank for Caleb.
And so you're tanking for Caleb, and I'm tanking for Marvin Harrison Jr.
Ooh.
So
somehow the Bears are going to screw us both.
Yeah, probably. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, we play each other this week. Some team's going to have to win, and I'm not sure whether the Panthers are going to be able to win. Probably if Dalton plays, the Panthers will probably win. If Bryce Young plays, the Vikings will probably win, which means that I'm one step closer to Marvin Harrison Jr.
Well, at least you guys got a defense there, Zach.
We do.
I don't know if we can say the same
but
thing.
Our starting linebackers hurt. Our second linebackers hurt. Our starting safeties hurt. One of our starting cornerbacks is hurt. Like, we had a defense at the beginning of the season. I'm not sure what left of this defense is left. But Andy Dalton certainly looks much better than Bryce Young at this point in his career.
Yes, he did.
So I'm not too confident.
Is that the lead-in for your first player? Trade for Andy Dalton?
No, not quite Andy Dalton, guys. Let's hold the horses there. My first trade for candidate is going to be a guy that, consensus, I feel like on this show we kind of had as a guy who could be top 12. When it came to running backs before the season, he's kind of disappointed so far. The receiving upside wasn't really there till this past week, and the offensive line has been terrible. But that is Miles Sanders. I feel like if you have Miles Sanders on your team, you drafted him high, and he really hasn't been able to return value. I still believe that this Panthers offense can get to a point where Miles Sanders returns value. And for that reason, I think that Miles Sanders, we saw last week with Andy Dalton. They got him involved in the passing game. They were drawing up plays to get him involved in the passing game. And with Bryce Young under center, it was kind of iffy for the first few weeks. He was kind of antsy in the pocket. He really wasn't really comfortable. And we kind of saw that. He wasn't really targeting the running back. He was just kind of throwing the ball away every time he got the opportunity to. He wasn't targeting anyone. He was just, there's the empty spot on the side of the field. That's where I'm kind of throwing the ball. But I think as we continue to see him settle in and as we continue to see this offense growing, I think that Miles Sanders will be a great option in the passing game as well as in the running game. Chuba has been fairly involved in the running game, but he hasn't been extremely involved. The team knows that they just paid Miles Sanders $24 million to come in and run the ball. And for that reason, I think that if you can get Miles Sanders, you might not have to pay RB2, RB3 value at this point, since he hasn't been great the first 3 weeks. I think you can get him for a value. Maybe you trade a wide receiver 3-4 for him, or you trade a running back 4. Maybe you're able to flip something like that, and you can get Miles Sanders, or maybe you trade like a Cam Akers, and then you get Miles Sanders plus back in return for him. And I think that's definitely a place where I would look to get value from, because I think Miles Sanders can still be great in this Carolina Panthers offense once it gets settled. Zach, what do you think about Miles Sanders? Do you think he can turn into a top 20 running back the rest of the season?
I think that's a safe landing spot by the time we get through the whole season. Yeah, I think top 20 running back is solid. I don't. The only thing I was just like a little unsure about. I'm not sure about the whole Cam Akers thing. But maybe I guess if you could dress that up a little bit, you could probably finesse that somehow. But yeah, no, I like Miles Sanders. He's definitely involved, and payroll says he has to be involved. So by default, he's going to get the touches. He's a prop bet kind of guy that you like to look towards because right now his ceiling is kind of he's presenting more of his floor than his ceiling right now. But yeah, good trade for a target. Get him while you can, and hopefully Andy Dalton stays the quarterback. That way, this offense can get it back on track.
Yeah, I mean, if Andy Dalton stays at quarterback, I think they'll get on track faster. But if Bryce Young stays at quarterback, I think by week 8, I think they'll be in a similar spot where he'll start to be more comfortable. You see it with some rookie quarterbacks sometimes it just takes them a little bit. You need some real-time snaps. You need to understand kind of what your offensive line can provide for you because the Panthers' offensive line has been hurt, so they haven't been providing the best protection or anything like that. So it's not like he's had.
It feels very Fitzpatrick Tua-ish right now.
Yeah,
to be totally honest.
Yeah, so, Fitzpatrick's better.
Right.
But
because I had a quick spot start last week, Andy Dalton, in my dynasty league that Zach's in, and I just happened to pick him up and start him, and it was a great play. But yeah, it's just it's funny to see him step in like that and look so good.
Yeah, I bet the over on Adam Thielen's everything stats last week. Yeah. I was as soon as I heard Andy Dalton was playing, I was like, over receptions, over yards, he's gonna get a touchdown. So I knew that was kind of coming for Adam Thielen last week. But it's kind of interesting to see. Andy Dalton just looks more comfortable than Bryce Young at this point. But I still think Miles Sanders can be involved. We saw it in Alabama for Bryce Young. He will check the ball down once he gets comfortable. So I think it's just going to take a couple weeks. But if you can buy low on Miles Sanders right now, I would definitely do that. Jeff, what do you think about Miles Sanders? Would you buy low right now?
Yeah. It's funny because hearing this, I actually sold low. I actually had traded him in one of my leagues. And it's funny because it was kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul once I tell you later on who I traded him for.
Who did
But I think it is now. Yeah.
Cordell Patterson.
There it is.
What a deal.
All of these guys are anybody that's kind of underperforming right now. And I think a lot of people are looking at him as underperforming. I think once this offense gets its footing, I think he's going to go ahead and bounce back and at least put up some pretty solid numbers. So, yeah, I think he is definitely a trade target right now.
Will, what do you think about Miles Sanders?
So it's the Schrodinger's cat to me, the box. So it depends when you open the box, right? Is it Dalton? Who's quarterback in? Like last week, you watch the highlights, you're like, hey, maybe Carolina has something here. But then it's like, well, what happens if Dalton, like, what's the coaching staff going to do? Are they really going to switch back?
Yep.
And not keep Dalton in?
Yep.
Ooh. And that's the uncertainty. I think if you can get him low, because owners are frustrated, you should. But then I think you may have to pick and choose the games. And you may be weeks you're frustrated because the coaching staff may not really be focused on this season. They're trying to get their quarterback in, and you just don't know how it's going to play out every week.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think it'll be till about week 8. I think Bryce Young comes back this week against the Vikings, and the Panthers will lose so that they get one draft pick.
No, man. We had a gentleman's agreement that we're not going to put that stink. You need to say Panthers are going to win. I'm going to say Panthers are going to win. We are going to will the Vikings to the first pick in the draft. That's what we're going to do.
But yeah, I think that Bryce Young is just going to take a little bit for him to get comfortable. As soon as he gets comfortable, he won't be worried about trying to make those big plays. DJ Chark's back, so I think that opens up a little bit underneath. And I think, once this Panthers offense settles, I think they're going to be taking those, 5 to 6 yard gains whenever they can get them. And that's going to be Miles Sanders out of the backfield. So I think that this offense, once it eventually gets to that point, I thought it would be sooner. I've been gravely disappointed, and maybe I will be gravely disappointed for the rest of the season. But I think that what we saw this week out of Andy Dalton, he wasn't great. He wasn't fantastic. He was just comfortable. And that's kind of all I can expect out of Bryce Young come halfway through the season is just for him to be comfortable in this offense and just to be able to dump the ball off when it comes to it instead of throwing the ball 40 yards out of bounds like I've seen all season. But Zach, who's the first player you want to talk about as a trade target?
It's Andy Dalton. No, no.
Well,
it's if you're in like a 16 team 2 quarterback league for sure. It's gonna be Rhamondre Stevenson, running back for the Patriots, because I mean he's so involved. It just seems like this offense is kind of like stuck in mud and can't really seem to get it going. But the schedule lightens up, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe they play the Broncos. I know it's kind of like too early to get ahead of this schedule thing, but I think week 16 they play the Broncos. So you got Rhamondre Stevenson in probably the best running back matchup you could possibly find ever. I like Rhamondre Stevenson. The targets are there. If you look up his game, the involvement that he's getting, he's shifty just like the camera was. So he's all over the place, just like Rhamondre. So.
We're keeping the viewers guessing tonight.
There you go.
My goodness. So Rhamondre Stevenson, go get him. I think with the landscape of the running backs right now, you'd be very happy with what he's offering. Maybe go after some, if you're like wide receiver rich, you need to kind of get a little bit more depth at running back, and you're tired of starting guys that are fringe RB2s. Rhamondre is certainly going to be a second half hero, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. You look at a guy who's been on the field 73% of the time, 73% of the time, 65% of the time, but he's only put up under 30 points in the first 3 weeks. I think he's been underutilized in the time that he's been on the field. This is half-point PPR, obviously. That's what I mainly play with. But in PPR, I'm sure he's a little bit higher because the first week he had 6 receptions for 64 yards. But I think this is an offense that we continue to see where they're not quite set in their ways yet. They're kind of trying to build with Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator. They were kind of stuck in a rut last year with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. They really didn't know where they were going. But as Bill O'Brien continues to get comfortable in this offense, kind of what I was saying with Bryce Young, where it takes a little bit to just kind of get familiar with, to understand exactly what everyone's thinking on the field, to understand where your coaches are going to go, or to understand where your quarterback's going to feel comfortable. It kind of takes some time to get used to. We had that time beforehand, as what Will was saying a few weeks ago, where preseason you were able to kind of feel each other out, trying to understand, maybe on a third down you prefer this play, to a third and short, you prefer this play. Whereas it kind of takes a few weeks into the season, and I think Rhamondre, he's been on the field, so he's obviously involved. The Patriots' backup running back, I don't think really scares anyone. Are you scared of Ty Montgomery? No. Are you scared of Zeke? Maybe a little bit. But I don't think he really eats into the receptions that Rhamondre should be getting. And over the past couple weeks, he's had 3 receptions over the past 2 weeks. And that's not who Rhamondre is, right? So he should be able to get, more and more receptions as this offensive line, if they can stay healthy as this offense continues to progress. Bill O'Brien in Houston, he traded for David Johnson, who is immaculate out of the backfield, and he was in Arizona. So maybe he tries to fill that kind of role in this offense where he is the check down guy. And I think that's something you can continue to see moving forward. With that being said, in my money league, Rhamondre Stevenson is sitting on my bench. As much as I drafted him, I'm starting Zach Moss and one guy we're going to talk about later on the show over him this week. But I think if you're certainly trying to buy low on a guy, which I think is kind of what this show is you're trying to find a value where people don't necessarily want this player, but you want to capitalize because the volume or the pass perceptions or the numbers are coming. I think Rhamondre fits perfectly into that category. Jeff, Will, anything you guys want to say about Rhamondre? Are you guys scared because he's a Patriots running back?
If anything, that kind of provides the value.
Yeah.
Is that he's going to get touches. He's still got 19 touches opposed to Zeke's 18, which is that's a heavy dose for 2 running backs. So he's going to get carries. And anytime a guy's going to get carries and possibly some dump offs out of the backfield, I'm actually looking, to get one of those guys like that. So I'm just hoping that Zeke doesn't increase anymore. That's the only thing that kind of gets you the scare. I don't think he will. I think Rhamondre at this stage in his career is a better back than Ezekiel Elliott. But you can never trust what happens with Bill Belichick and running.
I mean, to be fair, Bill Belichick did just say that Travis Kelce's best catch of his career was Taylor Swift. So maybe we're seeing a new Bill Belichick come out of the shell, because Bill Belichick 5 years ago would have never said that Travis Kelce's best catch was Taylor Swift. That would have never happened 5 years ago.
When you're winning, you can do that. You can go ahead and be mean to the press corps and everything. But when you're losing, you're like, I'm going to entertain these guys now.
The biggest thing Bill Belichick's losing is everybody's convinced now it was always Tom Brady and always be Tom Brady. It was never him. His coaching tree is a disaster. He should have retired when Tom retired.
Yep. See, I think the offense was Tom, but I think that those amazing defenses that the Patriots had for 20 plus years was all Bill Belichick. I think you look at the stats in the playoffs with Tom Brady versus teams that, they opposing defenses have put up, how many ever points. I think that it shows that it wasn't just Tom Brady, it was the defense, and I think that's where Bill Belichick excelled. But I think that Bill Belichick, he doesn't really have a team around him anymore at this point. He played GM for a couple off seasons and it hasn't worked out. Kind of similar to what we saw from his coaching tree, as you said, Will. I don't know if you guys remember this Bill O'Brien guy who's currently their OC. When he started to play GM, things went downhill in Houston.
Yeah, that DeAndre Hopkins trade was really good for Arizona.
Was it even really good for Arizona at this point? Can we say that Hopkins trade was good for Arizona?
For fantasy, for a couple of years, it was.
Every team lost that trade.
I will say to kind of just put a bookend on Rhamondre, with his lackluster stats. Look at their schedule. Hasn't really been too favorable. Pretty tough matchups, reasonably compared to what their offense is capable of. So I think if it eases up a little bit, you see a little bit more of that PPR value with Rhamondre.
Yeah, so they play Dallas this upcoming week, and then New Orleans, who have both been solid against the run. So maybe you take a week, and he plays terrible against Dallas, unless for whatever reason the Patriots figure out whatever the Cardinals had going on.
Then they
win that game.
Run the ball. That was it.
I think Dallas is.
The Giants tried to run the ball against the Cowboys. It didn't work. The Cowboys underestimated. The Cowboys underestimated that Cardinals team.
Actually, the run did work for the first
drive. One drive.
Yeah.
Three drives.
One drive. The Giants have a better rushing quarterback. They have a better running back than the Cardinals did, and it didn't work for them after that. So I think the Cowboys just kind of underestimated that matchup. And anything to do with the Cowboys, we can blame on Mike McCarthy because he'll be gone after this year. That's it for Mike McCarthy. This loss to the Cardinals proved everything you need to know. This offense has the talent to put up 40 points a game, and the fact that they lost to the Cardinals says everything you need to know about Mike McCarthy. He's gone after this season. I don't think Jerry Jones puts up with it anymore. Will, who's the first person you want to bring up as a trade target?
I'm going to bring up Josh Jacobs because I think at some point the Raiders are going to get back to really running the ball. And that's going to give Jacobs. And I think right now you could probably get owners of Josh Jacobs to unload him for something you wouldn't have gotten 3 weeks ago. Because, like I said, the show's about getting in cheap, right? Well, getting in cheap in week 3, not getting in cheap at trade deadline. So what players to me are considered undervalued right now because their teams have been horrible. There are some 0-3 teams that are still scoring points, right? And they're putting up fantasy points. But the Raiders right now, I think people are like, oh, my God, I got to get rid of this guy. Let me get what I can for him. I think there's some owners out there who would be crazy enough to move Jacobs for Akers because they're just desperate. We're talking about in a redraft league, Josh Jacobs was probably what, 5th pick? 4th pick?
Maybe early second round, I think. Probably felt.
Someone sent me a trade offer
It might
today.
have been earlier than that.
For Josh Jacobs in a league that I have him in. I don't remember the exact trade, but it wasn't as enticing as you would think it would be. But he's definitely, I'd imagine, a guy that is going to be moved around in a ton of leagues.
So, if you need a running back and maybe you're stacked in another position, you might be able to get a steal because I just think, look at their schedule, especially late in the season, later now. Their championship week scares me. It's at the Chiefs. But, those last few weeks, I think there's a little bit of meat in the schedule that Jacobs could put up some points and help you win some games.
But so to me, Josh Jacobs' rushing ability this year seems to be a little bit down. I don't think the offensive line is quite as good when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo being at center. I think teams aren't really afraid of the Raiders throwing the ball. In their week against Buffalo, Josh Jacobs had 5 catches. So if you're in a PPR league, that's great. I think that's something you can come to expect when he plays the Chiefs. I think that the Raiders are going to be playing from behind, so they're going to be throwing the ball, whether that's to Josh Jacobs. He's going to get the checkdowns because we know Jimmy Garoppolo he's not running around. Jimmy Garoppolo is not trying to hold on to the ball for 15 years and try and find Devontae Adams open downfield. If Adams isn't open, and then he goes through his second read, whether that's Mayer or Renfro or Myers, and they're not open, he's going to be looking to check the ball down to Josh Jacobs. So I think in that way, I think that the PPR value is going to be there for him. But if you look at his upcoming matchup, the Chargers have no defense. Green Bay has been allowing everything against them. New England hasn't been great. Then he plays Chicago, who just let the Chiefs run all over them. Detroit, New York Giants, and New York Jets. And then the Dolphins, the Dolphins have been good offensively.
Yeah.
They've still been susceptible when it comes to it, as long as the team's not like the Broncos, where they're absolutely trash and their quarterback is
Bronco country. Let's ride.
It has nothing to do with the quarterback for the Broncos. I want no Russ slander here.
I mean, if the Russ Seahawks lost by 50 points, that would have never happened. That would never happened with Russ at quarterback back then. But nowadays, it's okay. Sean Payton is overrated. Russell Wilson is overrated, and that Broncos offense and that Broncos team in general is overrated. And I'm quite happy to move on from that topic. But yeah, I think Josh Jacobs definitely buying low. You're buying him at his floor. I don't think he'll ever do worse than like 10 points a game, which is what you're getting in PPR. So if you can buy low at that price, I see no issues. Jeff, Zach, anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I mean, that was my whole thing with Josh Jacobs. It was just knowing as well that they're not in rhythm yet either. Remember, he hasn't been there. So he started off slow actually last year as well. So that's the thing, understanding that he hasn't been there. They haven't been in rhythm. He's going to get the touches. So that's why I definitely am taking a big chance on trying to go get some Josh Jacobs.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, you're right. It was week 4. He had 7 points, 8 points, 9 points, and then he hit 29, 25, 33.
Yep.
And
he looks like he needs to get in football shape for real quick. And the first few weeks are good for that. And you mentioned the Broncos. Did they already play the Broncos once this year?
No.
Yeah, they won week 1. They won 17-16.
They already did. All right, so they got one of the 2 matches out
and
of
then,
it. So
and then the last one is week 18.
Oh, so you don't even get it, really.
Everybody's going over Denver's schedule. Who plays what?
And it's fool's gold. I'm going to tell you.
No, Jeff. No, you're not.
And trust me, I'm not trying to vouch for the Denver Broncos defense at all. But in watching them in the first game, especially against the Raiders, they actually did well against Josh Jacobs. This is a different running team that the Dolphins have. That's not your normal. You've got track stars in the backfield. That's what everybody's like.
Yeah.
You look at Najee Harris against Denver's running defense. He's still going to get stopped. You have a small hole on any defense with those 2 speedsters in the Dolphins' backfield, and there's going to be trouble. It just got out of hand, and they just gave up. That was the thing. I don't think it's that Denver's defense is that bad. They just ran into an offense that was that much better. Mike McDaniels was basically playing Madden against that offense. I'm just saying,
I'm
dude.
loving this. Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I agree. You're right. The offense is just.
It
How
doesn't.
do you stop such a great offense? You know what I mean?
It doesn't matter. You let up 70 points.
Yeah.
That's a problem on you. It doesn't matter what offense you're playing. You be playing against the all-stars of whatever. If you let up 70 points, your defense is bad. It does not matter. Sean Payton is not this type of coach. He needed Drew Brees as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
You know, you saying Belichick needed Brady.
Yeah.
Sean Payton needed Drew Brees more than Belichick needed Brady. And I think that's becoming clearly evident in this Broncos offense. The Broncos offense scored 20 points, but how many of those points were already when they were losing by double digits where the Dolphins didn't care?
Double digits.
I can tell you.
Right.
All 20 points came from when they were losing by double digits. The Dolphins didn't care. They were playing prevent defense. They were playing rush.
This
three,
is
cover
not
eight the
anything in
entire
support of Sean Payton. I'm just saying from seeing their defense play, they're not as bad as this game made them look.
But they gave up.
They lost the first game
They
against the
gave
Raiders for stupid penalties.
They
They had
up.
a bunch of PI penalties. They had a bunch of just dumb penalties, which comes from coaching.
You know what the Broncos' problem is? The real problem is? They all want Dion to be the coach.
But he's not coming to the NFL.
That's what it is.
He can't.
Can you imagine
Yeah.
being in that media market and you're competing? I know they lost to Oregon, but there's still the hot flavor in Denver. And now you're competing with that, and you just gave up 70 points. Honestly, Colorado would have played Miami better than the way the Broncos played them on Sunday.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
That's just embarrassing.
Colorado didn't allow 70 points last time I checked,
Right.
even though they lost by.
To
40.
be fair, when are four of arguably the fastest people in the NFL on the same team at the same time?
Exactly.
You have Tyreek
Okay,
Hill,
so
Achan.
I'll forgive
Mostert.
Denver when Miami scores another 70 points against another team, because then that'll be the proof, right? But this is the
And
NFL.
they won't.
There's no way you give up. Like, come on,
Denver gave up. Denver
happened
gave
Denver
up.
gave
That's
up.
what
They
you
did.
said.
Yeah, they did.
Their defense
They did.
gave up. The team has had enough. You saw Garrett
Yeah.
Bowles say he's been here for 7 years, and he
They've been
hasn't
lost.
seen a winning team. Like this is Denver's culture.
And-
Denver's done.
Yeah.
But see, and that's exactly what I'm saying. They always blame somebody else, just like they did Russ last year. Albeit Russ did not play great. Well, you have the
Who did
defense
they fire
running over
last year? They didn't fire
yelling at him.
Russ.
What's that?
They fired Hackett last year. They blamed Hackett. It wasn't
Right,
Russ's
rightfully.
fault. It
Well,
was
it's
Hackett's
two,
fault.
exactly two
Now
bad
who do they
coaching
blame?
things, but you had the team imploding where you had people just feeling like I can run up to Russ and be like, "You're horrible. Why'd you do this?" On the defense, no, he
That's
didn't
this
do that
year.
same thing to them. I'd have been like, "What the hell? You just gave up 70 points, dude. That same dude that just yelled at me last year,
Yeah.
you just got burnt for 70 points. I don't want to hear anything.
It sounds so crazy to hear 70 points.
70.
Well,
No,
look,
we're not talking
it's
basketball
Zach.
here.
Zach, to your point, this is the first game I've thought, because at some point, I don't know about y'all, but you've been waiting. When is the college game going to transition to the NFL?
Mhm.
At what point does the NFL become more like the college game? That game was the first game I think I've seen that was like, oh, it's coming. The NFL games are going to be 63-60. It's coming.
We could have scored more, but we
Yeah.
were nice. We were nice enough to not make it 73. So
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
your coach was like, okay, I don't want to shove it to them too hard. Gotta just play it out, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, he kneeled the ball. He was very respectable about that. He didn't want to shove it in their face too hard. He didn't want to chase records, as his quote would go. But Jeff, let's move on here. I know how much you love the Broncos, and you're willing to defend them.
I
to the end.
know.
But who's the first player you want to talk about? We'll leave the conference.
My
who
first
trade for?
player is Mike Evans. My questions, I think he failed so far in most fantasy drafts because people were so afraid of Baker Mayfield being his
Kill him.
quarterback. But he proved that he is one of those guys that is quarterback proof. And it's so funny, like I was saying earlier, the draft or the trade that I made in week 2, I actually traded Brock Purdy and Miles Sanders for Jacobs and Mike Evans, and kind of worked out well for me. But yeah, this dude is just, hey, just throw it up and let me go. I'm going to go and get it. He's got something to prove. He is on a mission to prove that he still has something in the tank. So if people are still a little bit skittish about Baker being back there, this dude, to me, and he could get traded. Who knows? I mean, he could go somewhere where, can you imagine him being in San Diego now that Mike Williams is out with him and Keenan Allen, and Justin Herbert is a quarterback. So I'm like, he's a dude that I'm more than gladly trying to trade for.
See, I think I'm on the opposite. I'm obviously a Panthers fan, so maybe I'm biased. I hate Baker Mayfield. I think he's terrible. And I think what we saw last week is kind of, Mike Evans' ceiling for the rest of the season. He's played Minnesota, whose defense is atrocious. I think Will agree to that. He's played Chicago, whose defense is even worse than atrocious. And I think everyone can agree to that fact. He's played Philadelphia, whose defense has been bad against the pass, because Darius Slay, James Bradbury, they've been dealing with some injuries. But looking at his upcoming schedule, he plays New Orleans, Detroit, Atlanta, Houston, Carolina, Atlanta, Green Bay, all teams that have been great against the pass so far. He's still got to play New Orleans twice, and we all know that Mike Evans can't do anything against New Orleans. It doesn't matter whether Marshawn Lattimore is playing or not. He's probably going to get maybe 4 targets for 1 catch and 12 yards against New Orleans. That's the way it works. And I think that, the 26 points we saw in week 2 against Chicago is probably it for him. I think it's all downhill from there. I don't believe in Baker Mayfield. I believe come week 10, Baker Mayfield won't be the starting quarterback for this team. I think they'll have to move on to Kyle Trask if Todd Bowles wants to save his job, because if this team's not winning games 2-0, amazing. They could very well be 2-6 in a few weeks from now. And at that point, Todd Bowles is fighting for his job as much as he's fighting for anyone else's job. So he's going to try and switch things up with Kyle Trask, whoever else he can get his hands on. And, if Mike Evans, if you can get, running back 2, a wide receiver, maybe a solid wide receiver 2 in trade for him. I think as much as he was a guy I was targeting in drafts because he fell to the 7th or 8th round, I think he's a guy that I would probably try and flip for Garrett Wilson. I would rather have Garrett Wilson than Mike Evans going forward.
Do you know who is playing quarterback for the Jets?
It'll be Trevor Siemian in a few weeks. I believe more in Trevor Siemian than I do in Baker Mayfield, that's for sure.
I would rather have Baker Mayfield throwing it up to Mike Evans, who is 6'5".
It's not going to be Baker. It's going to be Kyle Trask.
Even if it's Kyle Trask, who I call Kyle Trash, but I would rather have him throwing the ball up. And I'll tell you what made the difference for me, Zach, and I wish you had him because I would send you a trade. It was the catch that he had this Monday. It showed
he's great.
He's got something to prove. He's one of those guys now that is just like, throw it up. I'm going to get it because you guys did not want to give me a contract. And I honestly don't think he's going to finish out the season as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
I hope not. I hope for his sake, he's been the most consistent wide receiver over the past 7 years, 1,000-yard seasons week in, week out. I've had to play against him twice a year, and I hope for his sake he goes somewhere else where he can get paid and he can actually have a quarterback that, deserves to be in the NFL. And I think that, if he ends up in Kansas City, Mike Evans is probably the wide receiver 4 in all of fantasy football.
I could only be so lucky.
And I have him in a couple leagues, and I'm probably holding him. I'm starting him over Rhamondre Stevenson, who we talked about earlier. But I think that I'm kind of holding him and hoping that he ends up somewhere else. But I think in Tampa, if he doesn't end up anywhere else, I think we've seen his ceiling this year. And that's only against a team where he plays Chicago, and he only plays them once. So I'm really, really doubtful. Zach, anything you wanted to say about Mike Evans?
Yeah, well, when Mike Evans helps me complete the trifecta of starting the season off beating all 3 of you guys in that dynasty league, you'll be revisiting this take and put some respect on that 1,000-yard every season. I could be the quarterback for Mike Evans, and he's still going to have 1,000 yards. But Baker Mayfield definitely deserves playing in Canadian Football League for sure.
Yeah, I don't even think he'd be good enough to start in the Canadian Football League, to be honest.
The XFL.
Yeah, maybe once you start getting down, he might be able to go back to college. I don't know if that's like something you guys do down there, but Will, anything you want to say about Mike Evans before we move on here?
No, I just want to point out that I found who the Cordell Patterson of quarterbacks is for you. It is Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, Baker's just not. Cordell Patterson at least can play football. Baker. Cordell Patterson has value to an NFL team. You know, you get that receiving role out of the backfield. He can return kicks. I'm not sure what value Baker Mayfield adds to your football team at this point. He's a backup.
Do they lead the division?
No. I mean, they're tied, I guess, with Atlanta and the Saints. You're tied with Derek Carr and Desmond Ridder. Does that really mean anything to you? Hopefully not.
Hey, I don't make the playoff brackets. It's off your record.
That's okay. Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta. That'll change everything.
Oh goodness, that would
I'll
change
be
everything.
I'm just
I hope
no.
so.
No, he has a no trade clause. Kirk Cousins will not go to New York and deal with that media. He will go to Atlanta. His wife's family's from Georgia. I'm just telling y'all, watch that. If Atlanta starts feeling like they have a shot, and the quarterback's holding them back, and they're willing to give Kirk an extension, I'm going to throw it out there.
If Kirk can get it in writing that Rodgers is not going to come back in the playoffs, he could end up in New York.
No, look. Okay, sidetrack here. Kirk Cousins, he didn't spike the ball with 40 seconds on the clock on Sunday. He cannot handle pressure. Kirk Cousins is very aware of who he is. He is not going to the New York Jets. He's not going. That media market destroys quarterbacks. He is trying to get another contract. This is why, look, he's not one of my players, but he may not be a bad trade here because you got to understand Kirk Cousins' psyche. He doesn't have a contract next year. He doesn't care if the Vikings win or lose. What he worries about is those stat lines, so when he's on the market next year, he can get another $30 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have him in one of my dynasty leagues, so I started him over Dak Prescott last week, and I won my week because of that. But
and he'll put 30 points up this week.
Yeah, against Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised. Carolina's missing their starting cornerback, their starting safety, 2 starting linebackers. They're missing some starting defensive linemen. So if you can put up, 30 points against a second string defense, I mean, I guess Zach Wilson could probably do that too, to be honest. But
let's not get carried away.
But let's move on here. We got some more trade forward targets, guys. Let's move on to my second guy, and that's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. I think we can probably all agree on that. A guy who in half-point PPR hasn't scored over 10 points this season. David Montgomery was hurt last week, and they all of a sudden forgot that Jahmyr Gibbs can catch the ball. I'm not really sure what was going on in this Dan Campbell offense. Ben Johnson, 2 targets in a game where Jahmyr Gibbs was on the field for 60% of the time. Ridiculous. But this is the perfect time. Go get yourself some Jahmyr Gibbs because we all know that's not going to stay. He's going to be involved in the passing game like he was in week 2 when he had 9 targets for 7 receptions. Like he's going to get involved. That's where he excels. He's good in the running game. They kept running him between the tackles in week 3, which was absolutely atrocious. We saw him in week 1 and week 2 outside the tackles where Jahmyr Gibbs is going to make his money. And I think that's kind of what, they'll learn from week 2. They played Atlanta, whose defense has been all right against the run. Mostly because Atlanta's offense hasn't been able to do anything. So been throwing all over Atlanta. But he plays Green Bay next week. Not good against the run. He plays Carolina, not good against the run. He plays Tampa Bay, Baltimore, who just lost to the Colts against the run. And Zach Moss, Las Vegas, the Chargers, Chicago Bears, Green Bay again, Chicago in week 14, and Denver in week 15, which could be the beginning of your playoffs. So if you can get a guy playing against Chicago twice and Denver who can catch the ball, that's your guy right there. And this is a guy who is fast overall.
And is fast. So they're
Does anyone have any objections to trading for Jahmyr Gibbs at this point? Or should we just say trade for Jahmyr Gibbs and we'll move on to Zach's next guy?
Trade for Jahmyr Gibbs. I actually have him in one league, and I'm kind of like getting frustrated at his usage. So
There you go.
I might
And
be one of
that's
those guys where you can send me a trade. But yes, I'm trying to
Will,
hold on to him.
Will, do you want to
Yeah,
transition to your next trade?
yeah, because you're saying this anyone no, you want Montgomery. Montgomery's going to be the consistent running back in that backfield. Gibbs will have his games, but Montgomery's going to be the consistent running back in that backfield. And people, because of the injury and because they're not sure about Gibbs, you're going to be able to steal him in a lot of leagues by making it a low trade. I'm just telling you, Montgomery's the guy.
I don't disagree with that take that Montgomery is going to be the volume guy and Gibbs will be the explosive play when they need it. I think they're going to turn him on more second half of the season when it's like, all right, here's the playoff outlook. These are the teams we have to beat. And at a certain point, you just got to get your talented players the ball. And you can only, ground and pound with David Montgomery so much. So I think they're actually both good trade targets because with their numbers being down and that kind of offense being up in the air, you could definitely get a value for sure.
I just want to, while we're on this Lions offense, Will's saying trade for David Montgomery. I'm saying trade for Jahmyr Gibbs. And I'm also saying trade away Sam Laporta.
How dare you?
He's coming off of his best game ever. And let's not forget, Jameson Williams is coming back week 6. He was drafted 12th overall 2 years ago. I believe he was the most talented wide receiver in that draft class. And I think we will see that. So if you can get, tight end, if you can get like tight end, number 2 overall value for Sam Laporta at this point in the season, which you might be able to do, trade away him, get Gibbs. I don't really love to get Montgomery because I think he might have more touches for the rest of the season than you'll see Jahmyr Gibbs have, but Jahmyr Gibbs will be catches.
But see, that's not. But Zach, that's the point. Williamson's coming back, or what's the wide receiver's name that's coming back?
Williams, Jameson.
There's a lot when they're throwing the ball. There are a lot of mouths to feed. There's only one.
Jameson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then Laporta.
That's
why I trade away Laporta.
They're like hammer running back last year, led the NFL in rushing touchdowns.
Yep, so. And that's Montgomery. And everybody, that's why I'm adamant about this one. If you can get Montgomery, get him now.
Don't you have Montgomery in your
I do,
and isn't he on your trade block?
Will is just trying to grease us
up. No, look, I've gotten offers for him in the last 2 weeks, and no way I'm moving him for what people are offering because people are trying to get in on him low. People, when he got hurt, I got an offer 3rd round pick. Got an offer just before Sunday's games. I got an offer 2nd round pick. If you look, there's not enough when they're passing the ball. There's not enough plays to get enough receptions to feed everybody in fantasy. So Gibbs will have that, he'll have that one game. He has 3 receptions and 80 yards and a touchdown, but it's not going to be consistent. And maybe it depends on the way your team's stacked too. If your team is deep at running back and it's a PPR or half PPR, but you're trying to get some touchdowns from your running back position, Montgomery, it's not going to be a perfect fit for every team, but I think he's a sure bet at running back on that Lions team.
If you're in a PPR league, I think Gibbs is going to be extremely safe down the stretch. I think we've seen what Jared Goff does, whether it was with DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, Todd Gurley, Cam Akers. We've seen this with Jared Goff. He's white. So obviously us white people, we're not running around all the time. We can't. It doesn't work like that.
The conversation there.
So we got to throw the ball to someone else who can. Whether it's, a Christian McCaffrey type or a Jahmyr Gibbs.
You got to pull up some Steve Young highlights.
Yeah, right.
That's a 1+1 example out of
what do you mean, bro?
A couple billion. All right, so yeah, maybe we all know Jared Goff isn't Steve Young, so he's gonna be dumping the ball off. This offensive line is good for now. They'll get hurt. He's not gonna have as much time to throw. As much as I love Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs he has to get involved in the passing game. What we saw last week was not winning football out of the Detroit Lions. They were able to win last week, but if they want to win this division in the NFC North, that brand of football that they were playing last week is not going to do it for them.
Never underestimate the Lions to be the Lions.
Yep.
Underestimating the Lions to be the Lions. Let's go, Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs. But Zach, let's move on here. Who's your second player that you want to trade for that I know Will and Jeff might also like?
Yep. I mean, if you listen to me all off season, I've been trying to tell you guys he's special and he's Jalen Hurts at a discount value, and that's Anthony Richardson. Hopefully his noodle is all set. You know how I feel about quarterbacks that get concussions all the time. I'm a little partial. So I'm hoping that he's back to himself, but it has been everything he's been advertised since entering the NFL. And I think he's, it's only going to continue to go up from here. We just watched the Gardner Minshew-led Colts beat Baltimore with Matt Gay's 4 50-yard field goals. This team has the nucleus to be good. Michael Pittman seems to be resurging this season. So I think Anthony Richardson, while he's coming off the injury and quarterbacks are a little bit easier to finesse, so maybe this is more of a 2 QB league or for whatever reason in a 1 quarterback league if you really can't do the streaming game.
If you got Joe Burrow, maybe you're trying to.
Right. If you gotta add some juice to your lineup, you gotta get a rushing quarterback, and I think you'd be able to finesse. I don't know exactly what you'd trade him for, but Anthony Richardson I think is just gonna be an absolute fantasy monster. He's gonna be like Lamar times 10.
Times 10. I think that's a little bold for me. I think we've seen Anthony Richardson in the NFL. He's been fairly accurate, which isn't really what we saw in college out of him. And I think that part of his game has really impressed me. But the thing that's worried me when I've seen Josh Allen play or when I saw Cam Newton play in Carolina for all these years is he's not a smart football player. He takes unnecessary hits. He tries to fight for those extra yards. And as much as you say you can coach that out of someone, Josh Allen's been atrocious for that this year. And we're in his 5th, 6th year, and they still haven't been able to coach that out of him. And luckily, Josh Allen's been lucky enough to not deal with those injuries. But Anthony Richardson already has 1 concussion from a hit he most definitely did not need to take. And if you're going to go with that, if he's not going to be able to deal with those kind of hits, I think the rushing upside's there, but I think it's a risky play to try and trade for Anthony Richardson. I traded him away in Dynasty, so maybe I'm impartial to this. I got CJ Stroud and a first for Anthony Richardson in a second.
So you got a first.
I got CJ Stroud in a first for Anthony Richardson.
You got a first. That's it.
Exactly. CJ Stroud's he's put up more points this season than Anthony Richardson. So looking at that. But I think Anthony Richardson, I don't think his shelf life is going to be very long. I don't necessarily know that, the accuracies look good, which was a big concern, but I don't necessarily know that he's got the football IQ to be able to deal with this NFL.
I'm going to tell you right now, 5 years from now, Anthony Richardson is the quarterback out of this draft class.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind.
No question.
And if he had been on a better team, if he had been in Alabama or Ohio State, he would have been the number 1 pick.
I'd put more money on Aiden O'Connell to be the quarterback out of this draft than Anthony Richardson.
Oh, God.
Goodness.
Oh, God, no.
We got to timestamp this.
Yes. Can we record September 27th, 2023?
That'll be the craziest shit ever if you are right, because you go back and look like a genius.
I don't believe Anthony Richardson is going to be a starting quarterback in the league in 5 years, and I think Aiden O'Connell very well could be. Anthony Richardson will either be hurt out of there, or he'll be a backup by then.
Oh no!
We just saw this team that was led by Anthony Richardson beat the Baltimore Ravens, who were probably the favorite going into last week to win the division after the way Cincinnati played the first couple weeks.
But see, it's the same thing, Zach. And that's what's so funny. This is the same thing that people said about Jalen Hurts. Yeah. And now all we've seen him do is ascend. And I think that's going to be the same
Hurts
thing.
Is smart.
I think Anthony Richardson just hasn't had the time to actually learn the game. Remember, he came into that position very late. Yeah. And if anything, he's showing he can pick it up. Because I think that's what now we're starting to see what NFL coaching will do to him. That's why over the season, since college, now him being in the NFL, the one thing people were afraid of was his inaccuracy. And you just said yourself, how much more accurate he has become. So I'm thinking if he keeps, being around, he may not have to run as much with the type of arm that he has. So I'm thinking if he keeps getting coached up, this dude can keep ascending. Remember, you had people talking about the Eagles should be drafting one of the top quarterbacks that were coming out when they had Jalen Hurts, right? When they got rid of Wentz. And Hurts stood there, he can't be their quarterback of the future. They need to go ahead and try to draft one of these guys coming out. He is basically behind Mahomes and now Tua, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. So I'm just like, I'm not going to say that right now. I'm going to wait and see how the story plays out.
We are in a disruption transition in the NFL and pro football. We are evolving from the stationary Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers quarterback, or the quarterback that can maneuver the pocket, to the running quarterback that can actually play the game. And they've been coached up properly by coaches.
That's not Anthony Richardson.
Oh my God. We got to timestamp this because 5 years from now, by far.
You're going to be looking at Anthony Richardson like the Bears fans are looking at Justin Fields right now.
No, because Justin Fields has never done what Anthony Richardson has done.
Right.
Justin Fields was a better college quarterback
Anthony
than
Richardson.
Anthony Richardson was.
His first 2 games in the NFL were better than any tape Justin Fields has in high school, college, and in the pros. You can't find one complete game that Justin Fields has ever played that Anthony Richardson has already completed in his first 2 weeks in the NFL.
And again, it's organization.
Yes.
The Bears are killing this.
Do you believe that the Colts are a good organization? Their running back won't even play for them right now.
I believe in their coach. You want to talk about coaching trees?
Yeah.
What's being done in Indy and Arizona is actually showing that these dudes can actually coach.
And to be fair, the Colts did beat the Bears in the Super Bowl. So
back when Peyton Manning was the quarterback. But to me, the Colts are even more dysfunctional of an organization than the Bears are.
It's the owner.
The Colts,
the coaches.
That's the problem with the organization.
No. That's the difference. Because the coaching staff is still better in Indy than what it is. We don't even know what they have in Chicago.
Report to.
The
Jim Irsay is
GM
going to get his way
and the
until
coaches.
he dies. He's as worse
GM
an owner
and the coaches in Chicago
Jerry
are
Jones.
horrible.
Jerry
That's
Jones
why
gets what he
everybody,
wants.
because they had the 4 wins towards the end of the season, went to putting Justin Fields back on a pedestal until now what the product they put on the field again has shown that they are inept. It's not necessarily Justin Fields. It is that entire organization from the ownership to the GM to the coaching staff.
If you put
Indy, it stops at. Remember, they won a Super Bowl with that same owner.
Kirk
Owner
Cousins
is
would be
that
3-0
crap crazy
on that Bears offense.
The owner is a steroid freak. He is crazy. But the guys that he has in place right now, especially with the coaching staff, they are at least competent.
But Zach, the problem is where you're right. I think if you put Kirk Cousins on the Bears right now, they're 2-1. I do agree with you that.
That's very possible.
The problem though is we're talking about organizations that can draft a quarterback and not destroy them. And the Bears have proven they cannot. In the history of this team, they cannot draft a quarterback and develop them. They cannot. It's in their DNA.
Last time the Colts drafted a quarterback high, I'm pretty sure he retired before he could get to his second contract.
A spleen laceration. He almost died.
They couldn't protect him. They learned their lesson from that, and they've moved on
just
to
woke
investing
up
in the
one day.
offensive line, and it doesn't work for them.
He was the better draft pick than RG3, and was on his way to a Hall of Fame career, and just woke up one day and said
they couldn't keep him healthy. That was the Colts. The Colts front office couldn't get him the protection he needed.
Zach, that's a Stanford kid who understood that I didn't have to play this game to make my life.
That's it.
That is the truth.
Super smart with his money.
Money, yeah.
Have to work.
Anthony Richardson is not the super smart guy that you guys are talking about. He'll be a backup in 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So is this one of those things like you're just gonna have a vendetta with the other quarterbacks that were drafted in the same?
Yes.
Because listen, I'll be honest, I'm guilty of it too.
I don't believe in Stroud.
I didn't want to see Jalen Hurts.
I don't believe in Stroud. And
Right.
I'm at this point, I'm not sure I believe in Bryce Young. Aiden O'Connell and DTR are probably the two quarterbacks in this draft class.
Well, I was going to ask you if you wish you had drafted CJ Stroud over Bryce Young.
I don't know. It seemed like too easy.
Well,
to
okay,
see.
but
He's too small.
But real quick, but Zach, you make an interesting point, and this is why I like Anthony Richardson and I like DTR. Some of these NFL teams fall for the hype of watching ESPN on Saturday. And they follow the hype. They follow for Alabama. And they follow for Ohio State. And yeah, they have a lot of talent there. But sometimes at the quarterback position, it's fool's gold. Where you got players at less heralded programs, Florida at that point with Richardson and DTR at UCLA. DTR at Alabama is the number one pick at the draft. Richardson at Alabama is the number one pick at the draft. That's
Richardson in Alabama would have just been a backup.
Oh.
Because of the socioeconomic system in that state of Alabama, probably. But it's like it's the whole system thing. Like I know Nick Saban would never produce a bad quarterback. It's like really?
Nick Saban doesn't produce good quarterbacks.
That's what I'm saying. But it's like those are the guys that get drafted high.
Look, Caleb Williams at USC has the chance to undo the USC curse. Because if you noticed, everybody's like, I ain't drafting a quarterback in USC.
Is this like Sam Darnold 2.0?
God, Caleb Williams is going to be different. Different university now.
That's what everyone said about Bryce Young, to be honest.
It's just like the same. It's a Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Because everyone thought Tua was going to retire a couple months ago. And bro took a couple Taekwondo classes. And see how things can turn around. So you never know.
One more concussion though, and Tua is done. So let's move on. Jeff, we'll let you talk about your team here. Who are you trying to trade for? You said in quotations, I already have him.
If I did not have him, I would be trying to trade for Kenneth Walker the third.
Yeah.
Because everybody backed off of him when they drafted Zach Charbonnet, and I was trying to tell people that is a backup plan. He is not to come in and be the starter. He's not to come in and even get 50% of the snaps. He is a break the glass in case of emergency. In case Kenneth Walker goes down, we have a now clone to go in and actually play in that same. We won't miss a beat with our running back. That's exactly what Seattle has been.
Didn't Charbonnet play 43% of the snaps last week? That's pretty damn close to 50%.
Look at how many snaps. Look at how many carries. He might have been in there, but look at how many carries he got compared to Kenneth Walker. And look at that for the first two games. He was not in there even as close as much.
No, but that's my point. He's getting more and more involved in this offense.
I don't think
Kenneth Walker's snap count has decreased every week. And Charbonnet's has gone up every week.
I don't think it's going to continue. But if you're a guy that thinks, that
Zach Charbonnet looks slow as molasses. I'm like, this guy looks horrible.
Exactly.
And Kenneth Walker, it looks like he's only like rounding out his game. I think he was a little more involved in those like deep passes this past weekend.
But you know what?
He was involved in the deep passes against a team missing their best safety and their two best linebackers.
Oh,
so you can get lost with a second, third string linebacker covering you for sure. I saw the way this Panthers defense was game planned. They were missing.
This might be a sore subject. I'm sorry.
This seems very
I should have picked somebody else.
I would trade away because Kenneth Walker is going to have another great game against the Giants, and trade Kenneth Walker away for an RB1 value going into their bye week.
Well, he is an RB1. He will continue to produce RB1 value. But I will say that's why I have anywhere I do have Kenneth Walker as the third. I also have Zach Charbonnet as my handcuff. But he is producing, I would say, better dividends than some other guys that were considered RB1s that were taken a little bit higher. And I think it's because people were so afraid of the fact that Zach Charbonnet was there. I'm just saying he has proven that he's still going to produce with Charbonnet there. That's it.
Yeah, I think he'll produce with Charbonnet there, but I think Charbonnet, we've seen it. His snap count has gone up every game the first 3 weeks. An upgoing trend. Kenneth Walker is on a downgoing trend. I'm sure this is an exponential thing where we'll meet in the middle somewhere.
It's not snaps.
Snaps is important when it comes to looking at the way.
Right, but his rushing attempts have gone up every week. He went from 12 to 17 to 18. So in the modern NFL, very few running backs are over 70% of snaps.
But they went from playing the Rams, who played good, to Detroit, who let up lots of points, to Carolina's defense against their entire backup.
But his carries.
So of course you're going to run the ball when you're winning by 20 points the entire game.
I don't. In fantasy, we don't care. All I wanted to do is touch the ball.
But their final matchups is Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Tennessee, who've all been great against the run. That's not matchups I want to play Kenneth Walker against in an offense where Zach Charbonnet keeps getting more and more involved. Whether or not if Zach Charbonnet's on the field 45% of the time, Kenneth Walker is going to be a volatility.
Kenneth Walker got 18 carries.
Go to those 4 weeks.
Charbonnet got 9.
Yeah.
That's all I care about right there.
Yeah.
That tells you right there the pecking order. Who is going to get the major carries? And I'm telling you from experience.
But that's in a game where you're winning. The Seahawks are not a good enough team to where they're going to be winning by double-digit points the entire game.
What I'm trying to tell you is looking at how the head coach actually goes into this. Kenneth Walker didn't even really hit the field last year until Penny got hurt. So people automatically thought the same thing, that Kenneth Walker, when he got drafted last year, was going to be their starting running back. It was Rashad Penny until he got hurt. So that's what I'm saying. Pete will continue to give the carries to Kenneth Walker III. Yeah. Now, if he is hurt, that's a different story.
It limits his upside. And I don't want to be trading for a guy coming off a 25, 26-point week that has limited upside.
Well, I wish you had him if I didn't have him, because I would try to trade for you to get him.
Like a guy coming off a 26-point week and half-point PPR, I'm not trying to trade for when I think his upside is limited, because they just drafted a guy at 36 overall?
I would be trying to trade you to get him then. If your thought, I would be trying to get him on my team.
So he had his best week when the backup running back had his highest snap percentage,
because they were playing against a team that had an entire backup defense playing and a backup quarterback playing, and a team that has no wide receivers.
Right now, I would think the backup quarterback is actually the QB1. It might have been worse if your actual QB1 was actually.
It's very possible, but it was against a backup defense in a game where the Seahawks were winning the entire game. So you're running the ball. That's how it works. If you're playing against the Cowboys or the 49ers or any of those teams that I said you guys were playing over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, you're not running the ball.
They're going to run the ball. That's what the Seahawks do.
Yeah.
And then you lose, and then you have to throw the ball.
Look, let's be honest, the only games on their schedule, I get your point, Zach. The only team that really stresses me, if I was a fantasy owner of Walker, is the 49ers in week 12. But Seattle always plays the 49ers good.
Exactly.
Those division games, they always play them good. So Dallas, I'm not sure what. Yeah, they went to Arizona, but there's always underlying issues with Dallas. Then they're at San Francisco the week 14, and that could be an issue. I'm telling you, Philly's not. Yeah, they're winning. They're 3-0. They're vulnerable. You can put points up on Philly.
You can put points up, but you know how you put points up against Philly? You throw the ball, and that's why Tampa Bay wasn't able to put points up against Philly, because they can't throw the ball. So you're going to be throwing the ball against Philly if you want to put points up as the Seahawks, and that's the DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett.
And that's what's great about them. They normally get the ball down to the 5-yard line, they get within that 10-yard, and now they're running it. That is the Seahawks MO.
I'm not a fan.
Which I like.
All right, maybe we can all get through our second players.
Man,
this is our second player.
So this is a marathon episode.
Yeah.
But we will move on to my next player here. A little switch. We're talking about a quarterback I don't necessarily love, but a guy who's underperformed, which is kind of a key topic from what all my guys have been. A guy who, expected more of when he was drafted. A guy who, he's coming off his best week of the season, but, some people were still disappointed. You might be able to try and buy low on him because people aren't sold on the offense. They don't think they're going to be able to repeat what they did last year, and that's A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown's still a wide receiver 1. Coming off a guy who currently sits as the wide receiver 22 in PPR leagues, the wide receiver 30 in half-point PPR leagues. I think he's the number 1 wide receiver on this offense. I think Nick Sirianni is just going to try and get A.J. Brown involved in this offense as much as he possibly can. I don't necessarily – I think that their run game is good, but I think that they're definitely going to have to rely on Jalen Hurts more than they did last year if they want to win close games against, the Rams, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Cowboys. Again, the Seahawks, they're going to have to be able to throw the ball because, the Seahawks against the run, they're pretty good when it comes to throwing the ball. That's a free game if you want to throw the ball over the top. It's good to go. Adam Thielen, I'm pretty sure, just put up how many yards and how many catches against that Seahawks defense. And Adam Thielen's an old white guy. So I'm pretty sure you're good to go.
Thielen was not there. He will be back.
Our
secondary is hurt right now.
That's the beginning of your playoffs. You can play the Seahawks. You just let Adam Thielen go for 12 receptions and how many yards? So that's a great matchup.
The Giants will be back by then.
The Giants aren't good either. We know them. The Giants, they can't stop anything. And the Cardinals. So if you can play the Seahawks, the Giants, and the Cardinals in the playoffs, Bro, that sounds like a fantastic matchup to me. So I think A.J. Brown is a guy who's disappointed, especially if you drafted him in the first round. You're looking at the wide receiver 22 in PPR leagues, and you're like, damn, this guy has not been great. Maybe you try and move him. You can get A.J. Brown for a low-end RB1, a low-end, maybe a high-end wide receiver 2. Maybe you do a package deal. You trade a running back 2 and a wide receiver 2 to get A.J. Brown at this point if A.J. Brown's on an 0-3 team. Something like that. So I think A.J. Brown's a guy you go out and target. The volume won't be there in compared to a guy like Devontae Adams. The Eagles don't have that high volume offense, but I think A.J. Brown's going to be consistent. I think the touchdowns will come. And I think Nick Sirianni is going to fold into the pressure of this Philadelphia Eagles fan base, and A.J. Brown's going to get involved. Zach, you think A.J. Brown's going to bounce back after a few lackluster weeks?
Yep. Yeah, it's like the underneath numbers show that he's more involved than his fantasy outputs would show. Yeah, so I agree. I like this one a lot. Yep. A.J. Brown was a good prop bet guy this week because his receiving yards were so low based off of what he had done the 2 weeks before. So, yeah, definitely like A.J. Brown to continue to trend upwards.
And I don't love Jalen Hurts, so if I'm saying buy low on A.J. Brown, you're probably in good boat if I'm agreeing with the fact that Jalen Hurts might be able to support another wide receiver 1. Jeff, Will, anything you want to say about A.J. Brown?
Yeah, I've been trying to get him, man. Yeah. It's been, after those first 2 weeks, unfortunately, I think this past week might have upped his value where it's now, again, going to be difficult to get him. But, yeah, I'm with you on that as well. I think he's a definite trade target.
Yeah, I think there's certain teams that even if they're starting off slow, people think, oh, they're going to come on. And that's the Eagles, right? Everybody thinks the Eagles are going to be in a Super Bowl. And so they're not going to move a player, right, that they think – like you have a better chance of getting Justin Jefferson in a redraft league, which is crazy, than you do A.J. Brown right now, I think, because people think, at some point the Vikings are going to blow the thing up and If they move Kirk, who's going to be thrown to Justin, if anybody, So, yeah, I think it's hard to get A.J. Brown right now. It just is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think depending on, like I said, if the guy who has A.J. Brown's 0-3, you might be able to make a move if he's struggling at running back or tight end or quarterback. I think you might be able to try and buy low on him. But I think another guy who started off hot week 1 has kind of died off quickly is a guy who Zach wants to talk about here. Who's your last trade for target?
It is Mr. Gambler himself, Calvin Ridley. I think this Jacksonville team kind of gets it together a little bit, and I think Calvin Ridley is still super involved, and he still has like that elite separation. And the first week you saw him and Trevor Lawrence already had that crazy connection, so it's still there. I think it's just a matter of this team kind of figuring out. It's Jacksonville, so they're always going to be all over the place, in my opinion. But yeah, I think like we might have mentioned the offseason. Like I'm saying, the AFC South, I think was going to be a little bit better than advertised. I think they kind of have. I think C.J. Stroud's been better with the Texans. I don't know if these teams are great, but I don't think the AFC South is as much of a cakewalk as we thought it was going to be for Trevor Lawrence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Calvin Ridley, the targets have been there. The receptions were definitely there week 1. I think that it's kind of been slow the past couple weeks. He had an ankle issue, I believe, week 2 or week 3. He was kind of on and off the field. I think if he can stay healthy, I have him in our Dynasty League that the 4 of us are in, and I'm quite happy to have him and Trevor Lawrence going forward. I think that they're going to be great. So if you can maybe buy low someone who thought that they had it all in week 1 when he went for 8 catches for 100 and whatever and a touchdown. He's maybe cooled off a little bit on Calvin Ridley. If you can go out, try and target him, maybe trade away a guy who's been overperforming like a Puka Nacua, someone along those lines, and maybe pair a running back sitting on your bench and try and get Calvin Ridley. I think that would definitely be a good option for your bench. Jeff, Will, anything you want to add?
Yeah, he'd definitely be. I'm holding on to him because if you go back and look at that Chiefs game, should have had 2 touchdowns there as the way that they were playing him. He just had 1 foot out of bounds, and even on week 3, had a touchdown that was an uncharacteristic drop. It was definitely a difficult catch over his shoulder. So I think he's still going to produce, but there are some people that are kind of looking at it and not looking at it in those types of with those types of thoughts, and kind of seeing that he could have really had huge weeks had he had a foot in, or had he not dropped that touchdown pass. And it just shows you that Trevor Lawrence is continually trying to get him the ball. So yeah, I would go after him just for that fact.
Being a little heavy in Kirk this year, I'm a little concerned that the Jaguars are still trying to figure out who they are when they're throwing the ball. And I think that affects both wide receivers. And I think that, they got to figure it out. They got to figure out not so much who's the number 1 wide receiver is, but just how they responded to the way the defenses are playing them. And there's going to be games where Ridley's getting doubled, and they're going to have to go to Kirk. Mm-hmm. And Trevor has to get into that. And that's the one thing, watching some of the highlights from last week's game. I know Houston has their number, and it's the weirdest thing to me because there's no way Houston should be beating them. But I think Trevor's overthinking this. Just go to the open guy. Go to the guy on single coverage and make the defense adapt to you instead of you trying to force the defense to pay a price no matter how they're covering. Right? It's kind of like, being a Viking fan, you lived through this, with Justin Jefferson. He didn't have 1 target in the first quarter of that game Sunday. And he still ended up with a lot of, 8 receptions in the game and a touchdown, because at some point the Chargers defense did have to adjust. So I just think Jacksonville, the coaching staff, and Trevor Lawrence, take what's there, man. Stop trying to, whatever pressure you're putting on yourself, trying to move the ball to where you think the number 1 wide receiver in the play should be. Take what's there. Read the defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you look at his team and you're like, you got to take what's there.
Yeah.
And I agree with you there, what you made about, Justin Jefferson. At some point, you can't just try to kind of scheme against him. So I'm kind of in on that. You talked a little bit about the scheme for Justin Jefferson. We want to keep this going here. We've already run a little long. But Will, a guy who played alongside Justin Jefferson.
I have Adam Thielen on one roster in our Dynasty League.
Let's go.
And I just think, like, if we're buying low, a guy that could help you win a couple of games, it's going to – watching him last week, I'm not sure – I think Dalton's going to play more games than we think this year. And when Dalton's playing, Thielen's going to get points. And if you have him on his roster, it just might – especially when we get into bye weeks. I wouldn't mind having an Adam Thielen on my roster that I could play in those bye weeks. That especially if Andy Dalton's playing quarterback can give me 14 to 20 points. Mm-hmm. So go get Adam Thielen. Now this week might be hard after what happened, but if he has a bad week this week against the Vikings, you might be able to. If he's not probably on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. If you're in a redraft league,
yes.
So I would. You might not even have to trade for him. Go pick him up. Get rid of Sky Moore, even though I've been holding on to Sky Moore now for a year and a fucking half. And I'm tempted to cut him. But my greatest fear is as soon as I cut him, this guy's going to score 3 touchdowns. And so Sky Moore's on my bench.
It ain't going to happen.
It ain't going to happen, is it?
It ain't going to happen. You might as well go ahead and cut him, man.
Rasheed Rice. That's good. Look,
I think so. I think so. I don't know what the hell Andy Reid is doing, but anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Another thing. So Adam Thielen. Just
love it. Give
the old guy a chance.
See, I bet the over on Adam Thielen for everything in week 3 because I knew Andy Dalton was going to be comfortable in this offense. I knew they were going to get him involved. I think, if you're trading for Adam Thielen, I don't think you should expect to start Adam Thielen in week 5, week 6, week 7. Mm-hmm. I think he's more of an end-of-season play in the playoffs. He's going to be able to come in, and he'll get 6-7 receptions a game. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what you can expect from this Panthers offense is that as it continues to grow, I think that they're going to get more and more involved in what they should be doing, which is doing a zone run scheme and then running the play action off of that. Adam Thielen will be the safety blanket along with Miles Sanders, and DJ Chark will maybe break an occasional one over the top. Nothing too fancy, nothing too crazy. Just get back to the basics of playing football. Run the ball to open up the passing game. And I think as Bryce Young continues to get comfortable in an NFL offense with these big, fast, fat guys chasing after him all the time, I think if he can get used to that, it's not quite what you play at against college. These guys are definitely a few levels above. So if you can get used to those big guys who are probably like 4 or 5 times his size, at 5'10", or however tall he actually measures in. But I think Adam Thielen could be a good guy. I don't know if I'd go and trade for him now. Give Adam Thielen another week or 2 with Bryce Young at the helm, where Adam Thielen maybe has 5 points a game, and then try to go trade for him, because I think it will take Bryce Young a couple more games to get used to it. Mm-hmm. But I think Adam Thielen could be a guy that could be startable on some championship rosters come the end of the season. Zach or Jeff, anything you guys want to say?
Love Adam Thielen.
As long as Dalton's there, I don't know what's going to happen with Bryce Young. That's the only thing.
Well, look, hey, before Bryce got hurt, that second game, Thielen's like, I think he has, if you're going to tell me what wide receiver is the best wide receiver with Bryce Young right now, I think it's Thielen. And I think that week 2 game showed it. He's comfortable with Thielen. And Thielen is very good at making a bad throw look good.
Yeah.
I don't think Bryce Young's comfortable with anything. I think you could probably throw a bet out on that field, and I don't think Bryce Young would be comfortable in that bet. Like he doesn't look comfortable at all. He doesn't look settled. He doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. But Thielen looks like maybe his safety blanket. Okay. If we had to say, along those lines, I think that the receptions will be there. But
best wide receiver on the team for sure.
Yeah. For 1 year.
I like Chark so much.
I like Chark too.
Chark has been my guy forever. I think he's such an underrated wide receiver. If he could actually get the volume, I think he could be special. But we got one more guy we need to talk about. We're already probably 20 minutes over what we're normally at. Jeff, this is one I love. I love this guy. I've loved him forever, even though he plays in my division. I think this is a guy that's still good at football. Who you trying to
Cordell Patterson.
Cordell.
This is
Cordell.
like doing one of those kind of let me reach and dust this guy off and put him back in.
Cordell.
Huge dividends. It is Alvin Kamara. The Saints need something back there. It shows that it wasn't necessarily the line with the fact that Tony Jones Jr. looked decent, but Jamal Williams had a hamstring issue. Kendre Miller is just not ready for prime time. So now that leads a PPR monster, even though he's a little bit long in the tooth, Alvin Kamara to come in, get a lot out of the backfield, and still break off some pretty decent runs. So I just like the opportunity that he's going to get. He's going to get the carries. He's going to get the dump offs out of the backfield, especially, Carr's used to doing it, but so is Jameis Winston if he's going to be in there for a while. So I think now, because nobody really knows what he's going to do, you might be able to get him pretty cheap.
Yeah, I think, he's coming off the suspension, which maybe plays into hand. Maybe someone's expecting him to come out and do good this week, and maybe they're not willing to trade him quite yet. But if he does end up putting up a lackluster game this upcoming week, maybe you're able to kind of try and pry him away, or maybe the guy who drafted him is already, he's already 0-3, 1-2, and you're able to kind of pull him away. And I think that's a situation where maybe Alvin Kamara is a guy you want to trade for. He plays Tampa Bay this week, which isn't a great matchup when it comes to the running back position. Tampa Bay's offense isn't anything special. I feel like I've harped on that for ever since they signed Baker Mayfield. But I think that this offense definitely could be lackluster. It's a division game, could be a close. It's going to be a close game for whatever it's worth, whether it's, the Saints win by 3 or the Bucs win by 3. I wouldn't be surprised either way. You brought up Jameis Winston. He should hopefully only be starting for a week or two, and then it will be back to Derek Carr, who is able to support. I don't know if you guys ever heard Josh Jacobs. He was kind of good last year. He was able to get involved in that receiving game with 53 receptions. I think that's kind of where we see Alvin Kamara excel, especially at this point in his career. He's not like he's once the spry chicken he once was. But if he can get anywhere near close to that target share that we saw Josh Jacobs with last year, which I think is something that's definitely possible in this offense. My biggest concern with Alvin Kamara is this Pete Carmichael guy and this Dennis Allen guy.
True.
And I don't love their coaching staff. I don't believe their coaching staff has any idea how to run an effective offense in the NFL. I think this is something that we're going to see them struggle with all year until they can get someone else in. So I think Kamara can be a safe guy. I think he has limited upside because I don't think that this offense can be anything special this year. I think that with Olave and Michael Thomas there, it kind of limits his upside. I don't think anyone thinks this offense is going to be like a top 10 scoring offense this year. Derek Carr's already dealing with injuries. If Jameis is playing, that's great for Michael Thomas and Chris Olave, but is that great for Kamara? Maybe. Maybe it gets him a couple big plays, so he'll have like a Devon A-Chain game where he goes for 50, and then he'll have like 3 games in a row with like 5 points.
Never as good as A-Chain.
But that's not great for fantasy. So I think as much as I love Kamara and as much as I have him in a few leagues and I'm hoping it comes to fruition, I'm not willing to give up too much to get Alvin Kamara this year. The team's rough and he's old. Zach, Will, anything you guys want to add before we close the show out?
I love Alvin Kamara.
I just want to let Zach know it was only a rumor. Okay, I know that's what got you so riled up today, man. Cordell Patterson is not going to Carolina, man. It was just a rumor. Yeah. It's just a rumor. I just want to let you know, man. Guys, that's why he's been kind of really, really on edge this whole show. Somebody told him that the Panthers were trading for Cordell Patterson.
Rumor
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with someone earlier, and they were like, Cordell Patterson might be a Carolina Panther soon, and just kind of riled
It's
me.
rumor, man.
Mike
But-
White.
Yeah, I think Kamara. If you have him, I guess you hold him, but no way I'm moving for Kamara at this point in his career. With that being said, we've talked about. I feel like we've been on here for an hour and a half, but we've talked about maybe 12 guys that we're trying to trade for at this point in our redraft leagues.
Very Panthers colored episode.
Black and blue. Lots of bruises going around in both directions. We all know the Vikings are going to win this week. The Panthers
Stop
are
saying
one
that.
step closer.
Stop
to
saying that.
Junior. It's going to be
Stop.
great for Bryce Young. The future is so bright. Kirk Cousins will be the Vikings quarterback for the next 10 years.
If we go 0-4, then they will finally start moving pieces. They can move Daniel Hunter. They can move Cousins.
But when you win this week, you'll be 1-3, and you'll be like,
And then they'll think they're coming back.
Exactly. That's what's about to happen.
God.
I hope you know. That's what's about to happen. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys took something away from this show. I hope you guys are going to be able to make some trades for some of these guys. Hopefully not Cordell Patterson. I know we talked about him a few times, but we're not trading for Cordell Patterson. Let's just keep that out of there. We also talked about this Broncos team. I don't think anyone is trading for them. Hopefully, if you have them, maybe you send them to the waiver wire. I hear they're not very good at football.
Broncos
But
country.
yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank my guests for joining, Zach, Jeff, and Will. Go check out the Presser app. You can check out Zach at Ocean State FF on Instagram, Twitter, whatever social media platform you use, whether you call it X, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Fans.
Yeah, OnlyFans. Zach on the OnlyFans.
Ocean fans. I got me on Ocean fans.
Ocean fans. I thought you said OnlyFans. I was gonna be.
No.
I was after the show. I was about to go search up
Just
Ocean
ceiling
State
fans,
OnlyFans.
Ceiling fans that generate the calming sound of the ocean.
The way the season's going, I'm gonna be cheering for Miami the rest of the year.
You should, because we're gonna beat teams by 50 points every week.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, apparently,
This will
but
be
we're gonna head out. I just want to leave us with one thing: the Broncos suck. Have a good night.
Have a good night. In this country, we tried.
Yeah, we tried. No, we didn't. We really didn't try.